In this episode, we chat about why to care about your D&D story and what aspects to focus on as a GM and player. Make sure to like, follow, and subscribe whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And share this episode with a friend if you'd be so kind. My name is GM Smudge, and welcome to the Smudgecast. What's up, everyone, whenever or wherever you are, and today I'm excited to hang out with not only a friend of mine, but also a literal family member. Hi, Trevor.
Hi, Steven.
You're my brother.
In-law.
Yes, in-law.
To be clear.
Yes, very to be clear. I guess that does matter. But I'm super excited to chat about this particular topic on why to care about a story, because I think of all the years that we've played D&D, all of us care about D&D in different aspects, whether that's combat or exploring a different part of it, or even the role play. I think you care less about the combat and more about just like the story experience. Does that feel true?
Yeah, there's times where in combat I'm kind of checked out because there's some slow times after you figure out what you're gonna do on the next turn.
Yep.
Obviously, you got to pay attention to if scenarios change, but a lot of times, like, I'm prepared and know what I'm going to do next. But the parts of D&D that I really care about are the character development, the stories in between, like when the DM is like, okay, now we're just going to travel. Do you guys want to say anything? That's where I'd really take the time to talk to the other characters and try to kind of flesh out their backstories, as well as maybe create connections so I can talk more about mine and where the character is at that point in their journey.
Exactly. And I think that you do such a great job with putting pressure on people and the GM in a really healthy way in the party to really think about, why the heck are we doing what we're doing right now? Does it matter? Does it affect the story? Like, as much as I think we like to have fun and do stupid stuff and be silly and laugh, I think even in the campaign, like even as we play together as me GMing or we're as players playing together, I lean a lot on you with how you're interpreting what's going on.
Yeah.
You know? So when it comes to caring about a story, because I think that when I watched, I like so many people on TikTok and Instagram and watching people, I think they get into this weird mindset that I just don't I don't relate to when it comes to D&D. I just feel really passionate about it. I care deeply. I don't like to sit and just kind of like be lackadaisical and kind of just like half-ass play. I want to, like you said, get into the nitty-gritty. Why do you think people don't necessarily want to step into that or try to like get really involved into a story?
So it might seem kind of silly to say this, but I feel like telling a story together is very intimate. It can be a very intimate thing.
That's so
and
true.
Being family with you and a couple other people that we play with, and I feel like we're more comfortable to be ourselves and be either silly, or when you create a character, there's always going to be a little bit of yourself in it.
Yep, that's so true.
So it's when I first started playing D&D, it was with you, and
let's actually talk. Let's tell that story. Tell that story if you wouldn't mind.
So it was me, Shannon, and Shannon's my wife, and Steven's sister-in-law. And so Shannon was like, hey, I think it would be fun to play D&D. And I'm like, I don't know. That's kind of nerdy. I'm not really into that. I feel like that's for like thespians and people who are like nerds and creative. And I'm just not a creative guy. I like to go outside and play yard games or play sports or play spike ball and stuff like that. And Shannon was like, I don't know, just give it a try. And I'm like, okay, I'll give it a shot. I watched Community, and they had a few episodes of D&D, and it was kind of fun.
They're so ridiculous. Any show that has D&D, even like Stranger Things, it's just ridiculous.
And so when we started playing we asked Steven if he wanted to play, and he was like, yeah, for sure. We asked another one of my cousins, Bree, and I think she also had an episode on here. Yeah. And so we so we started playing, and immediately Steven was our GM. We got really into it, and that's really where I really learned how to tell a story. Like, I'm not a creative person by nature, but in order to be creative and develop that artistic side, you need to practice it. And so just over the years, I've really enjoyed getting better at storytelling and more creative in not only making the characters, but creating a world and a person together.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting, too, that you bring that up because your first character, Lars, that we played with was the first character that I intentionally thought through. How can we include backstory into the actual story? So remember when you finally went into like they're back home and it was all I mean typical storytelling, but like that was for me as the GM with you in telling your story a bit or wanting to tell more of your story. That was the first time I ever did that. Like
it was great.
And I mean probably if we watched that back now it'd be like a little maybe cringy, I don't know, but like it just felt it mattered to me, and I'm guessing it mattered to you. And so it's interesting that you bring up, though, that it might be intimidating to care about story or to really lean into story because it takes time. It takes, I don't really want to say effort. It takes that intimacy. It feels very vulnerable at times. You have to be transparent. You have to like open yourself up. Is that true? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, there's people who you invited to our table that I love getting to know new people.
Yeah.
But Shannon, my wife, is a little more hesitant to be open to them. So when you brought new people to our table, it was like a little weird because we didn't know them and we didn't know like how into it they were going to be, if they were going to be weirded out, like if I started like doing a scene and crying at the table,
and, which happens every week. That's every week you do that.
But after we play a few sessions, we get comfortable with them, and then they become our best friends because we're building a world together. We're creating a story together,
and those memories that we create in game feel so real. Yeah. So that's even one of the things that I want to touch on too is like that communal experience. But before we even get into like deep dives on what happens when we care about a story, can you touch on a little bit like when it comes to what makes a good story a good story? Like can you hit on what makes a good story? Like for you particularly?
Yeah, so in every story, I mean, we learned since we were kids, there's build up to a climax, the climax, and then there's the build down. And everybody's focused on the climax or the battle. Yep. Whereas I feel like the best parts of stories, whether it's movies, books, a story that we're telling together, a D&D campaign, I feel like it's the little moments that build up to the climax. And then the moments like after the climax and like dialing down and then the resolution, you know?
Yep.
So that's just something that I care about. Like if there's no build up to the climax, then you don't care about the climax. And then if it's the climax and then it's over, like there's no neat resolution.
And you don't feel the weight of what the hours and hours you just spent, or days even, that you just spent on this quote-unquote journey doesn't pay off. And that's for both the GM and the players working together simultaneously to have that journey. And I always say this too when it comes to stories and obstacles, like the story is a story because there's an obstacle, and what the characters do in the face of that obstacle is the story. So like if there's no, again, we're talking to the kind of a person or the groups that kind of like, and again, there's no hate to this. Like if you love to get your group together and you're like, just you want to roll them bones and whatever, cool. Like that's your thing. I just think, and what I'm hearing even you say, there is a level of D&D storytelling that can be so meaningful, and the payoff can feel so great, and the memories you can make can be so worth the amount of investment.
Yeah, like the other day we had this moment where I literally started crying at the table and like had like this very emotional moment between me and my wife, who's our GM right now. And like I was talking to an NPC, but I was like getting really into it and like literally tears welling up in my eyes because I was so into this moment. And I don't think that's ever a moment like me or anybody at that table will forget.
And so we take this episode and we let the Trevor 5 years ago listen to it
Yeah.
to hear you talk. You'd be like, "What are you even doing?
Yeah,
What,
don't remember that at all.
yeah, what is even this?" So then let me ask you this: what do people miss when they don't step into that? Because it can be intimidating. Yeah, it can be time consuming. It can feel vulnerable. Like those are all true things. It can feel out of your comfort zone. All those things that you've already touched on. But what could we miss, do you think, if we play this silly game and it's just sort of like come and go, let it be? Like what are the pieces or the aspects or the elements that we could be missing?
So I don't know if even in game is the things you can miss out on, because for our group specifically, like we would hang out for a good hour ahead of time. Sometimes we would make dinner beforehand, eat dinner, and then come and play. And after we're done playing, we hang out and watch. I like to watch football after, but people are just around talking. And so I think a big part of it is the community around the game, not just in the game. But if you don't dive into the game, you don't get that comfortability and that sense that you can be yourself around people that you're meeting through D&D.
Yeah, and like online can be so hard too.
Oh, it's much harder.
It's so much harder. I think the past, past 5+ years we've been doing this now, we've been very fortunate to have people around us that we can have dinner and people can cook.
Yeah.
and people and we care about the lives of the individuals. So that, some people can't have that because they just don't have people in the area or because of, life circumstances, etc. I mean, COVID played a huge role into that. People, people have to be home, but they still want to play. So you're making the most of what you can with the things that you have. But I think to your point, there is a huge aspect of this. I mean, that's what I call is a collaborative care. Like we are not just caring about the story, but we care about the individuals that are coming to the table.
And like after the game, when we talk about what has happened in the game, like people can actually be upset about how one character treated another character. And you're like, oh, that's silly. That's just what my character would do. When I think that's just like an excuse. That's what I did. When you're talking after the game, it's important to take note of when people might have felt insulted or not cared for in that part, and it might just be your character doing something, but it can actually affect them outside of the game.
Very true.
Which seems silly,
but like I think
totally.
I think what you're hitting on is like
not.
These are the types of things that this is like the taking it D&D to a whole nother level and caring about your story is like, I'm going to live inside my character as much as I can in a way that actually might produce a conflict in game with your character. Not Steven to Trevor, but Gage to, Bash. And how we reconcile that is something that we have to pay attention to. But like that's a result though of what happens when you do care about your story is that you may have to walk through that, but it's still worth it.
But it's just like in real life, like if Gage and Bastion have a conflict and then they resolve it and then they're stronger after.
That's so good.
This is so reflective of real life where if me and you have an issue, which we've had before, after we resolve it, we're good and we are stronger and better friends and better brothers and care more about each other because we've been through that conflict together.
It's so good. I think there are several byproducts that occur though when it comes to telling an amazing story, like you are hitting on just so well with the collaboration of meaningful relationships, potential conflicts that may occur, but it's not about you and the person, it's about the characters and you just
Mm-hmm.
playing out that thing. But I think another aspect of this that I'd love to touch on and get your opinion on, another byproduct of why to care about a story, is it helps you make sense of the world. Like, I think when I play D&D, I care deeply about how does the world feel and how does
Mm-hmm.
my characters live inside the world. I even was on TikTok the other day of someone who was like, I don't understand why people care about world building and why do people spend time thinking about the places and stuff. Like, I just kind of base it off of what I feel like in the moment or that. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I think I totally hear what you're saying, but in my perception of what I'm hearing you say is that it's more about convenience than it is about inspiration and wanting to tell an inspiring
Yeah.
experiential story. I think and why you to I think you should care about your story is it's going to actually help you make sense of the world. Could you might like hit on that a little bit if you wouldn't mind?
Yeah, so the campaign that we're in right now is Theros, and I think you need to mold your character and the story as a whole to fit the specific world that you're in. Because the I'm playing a centaur, and there's no centaurs in like Eberron or
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
and so not only can you build a different character, but you need to look at the world and how it works in order to um, describe like either your character's backstory or what they're looking for in the long run. Like Bastion is from the Lagona tribe, and when they come of age, they go on a journey to find themselves and find things they care about, and then they go back to their tribe. So, something that I'm doing with Bastion is I'm trying to find what he's passionate about. And I have some of my ideas in my
That's
head,
so cool.
but depending on where the story goes and how he interacts or connects to a certain city they visit or a certain tribe of people, that's going to determine what he cares about and what he's passionate about. And once this campaign comes to a resolution, he can, you know, like what he's gonna do in the long run because he's a young adult and he's just trying to figure it out. So it's fun.
Love that. I think within what you're saying too is in making sense of the world. It's like a give and take. You're offering an invitation to the GM to create something within your backstory and your character for the world. You're also then from the GM getting an invitation to like, okay, well maybe they would be a part of this tribe, or here's a character that I could play as Centaur. And it's like this going back and forth. And I think that in offering this invitation to you to be creative and think through this, what are you feeling? Maybe this is a little bit like emotive or whatever, but like maybe this is why people don't necessarily want to step into stories because it just is like work, and it's like you're stepping into an emotional part of you or whatever. But like creating Bash, like what has that felt for you? Like how has that been fun? Has that been tedious? Has it been like interesting? Has it been difficult?
It's definitely been fun, but at times it's been difficult because Bash is a reserved person and he's kind of gruff and like not very he's he has soft spots with people, but with people that he doesn't know, like we didn't know each other when
Right.
our characters didn't know each other when they started this campaign. So he's kind of reserved and like kind of blunt, and people might get upset. Other characters might get upset by the way he reacts, but I'm not that way. Although I'm not very affluent or like the most friendly person when we first meet.
Yeah. What a
I,
dick.
I after we talk and get to know
Oh,
each
that's
other a
funny.
little bit, I tend to become more silly and more
Yeah.
outgoing and actually
Absolutely.
care about building relationships rather than just having a surface level thing, even though it's harder. But me and Bash are very different, but we also have that gruff exterior when we first meet. So it's like it's exploring a different part of myself and being more introspective on that part and how I can become a better person and maybe even become more friendly when I meet new people in real life.
There's another podcast that I love to listen to. It's called The Adventuring Academy. It's with Brendan Lee Mulligan, Dimension 20, College Humor.
Yeah.
And he did an episode with Marisha Ray from Critical Role, who played wonderful characters, but she was talking about Keyleth, Campaign 1, to Bo in Campaign 2. There was no Campaign 3 at the time, but between those two characters and like how she's experiencing the world and experiencing herself as Marisha Ray within these two characters, because they're like night and day comparative, and how much she's grown in empathy and what's that done for her. And I think that if you don't care about a story and you don't care about, and I say that with not like trying to be mean, but like it's just like I don't care, to do this or that. It's just like a value. But since she values it so much and puts a lot of intentionality to it, she's coming away with this like experience of understanding herself, which becomes, like you're saying, a growth of who you are as a human.
Yeah. And I feel like it definitely translates to real life because we have a friend. She is not only emotional in the game, but very sensitive in real life, which isn't a bad thing at all. But the way my character treats her character sometimes makes her be uncomfortable. But I know in real life, sometimes I can say something that makes her uncomfortable. So it's just learning through her character, like how I can be more sensitive and think more about my words to her in real life,
No,
if
totally.
that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I love that you said earlier too about a purpose. I think when you do really, really care about a story and navigating the complexities of it, you have to think about what's the purpose and what's the motive of why I'm here. Why is my character here? Why would I end up being a part of this? I think great stories need to answer those why questions. And when you do, the payoff feels really complete, like a very completed understanding of why something is the way it is. But when it comes to not only making sense of the world and enjoying the world, what about, like, I know you said it's kind of nerdy, or like when you first started, like, this is nerdy, or like, this is whatever. How have you experienced play and silliness within stories and experiencing that in a D&D session?
So as I mentioned earlier, I like to play sports. And whenever I play sports, I'm really intense. Like,
Yeah, you are.
I want to win, and I've gotten better over the years. I'm not as competitive, but I still bicker with my brothers sometimes about a point or rules in spike ball or whatever. And with D&D, I also said it brings out my creative side, and I've learned how to be more creative. And it's just goofy, and you want to have emotional moments, but you don't want to take it too seriously. You want to have fun, but at the same time, it depends on what the campaign is. If it's a dark noir campaign, you also want to be into that, but you can still have fun, goofy moments within that, but you don't want that to be the main theme. Whereas if we're in another campaign that's like Disney themed, like with a bunch of Disney characters, you have more freedom to be silly and goofy and
Literally goofy.
Yeah, from the Goofy movie.
Yeah, right. No, that's exactly what I mean too. I think you're experiencing play, and as we get older, we talk about how I mean, that's why in the movie Polar Express or any Christmas movie where the adults can't like hear the Christmassy experience because they have lost that, what would you call that?
That childlike.
Yes, exactly. And I think what I mean by play too is this, that we get to experience this imaginative exploration in us and being silly. And I think more than just hacking and slashing, because I think hacking and slashing can be very story oriented. It just might be a little bit more difficult at times.
Yep.
It just depends on you and what your goals are. But the parts of you who come out are more of these childlike, silly, unique, creative, charismaticness parts of you,
Yeah.
depending on your character and depending
Yeah.
on the world setting,
Yeah.
like you said.
Totally.
But what parts of you have come out in D&D in stories that really don't come out anywhere else? Is there any, or do they all come out in different ways?
So, like I said earlier, I wasn't a very creative kid growing up. I wasn't artistic. I wasn't really into theater or anything like that.
Boo.
But as we started telling these stories together, I got to cultivate my creative side, and I got to experience musicals and plays and going to art museums and see that because of the people I met, you being a thespian,
Yep.
and Shannon being an artist, like obviously I knew you guys before we started playing D&D, but you guys have kind of pushed me to be more creative and more cultured, I guess.
Creatively cultured or
Yeah.
something like that, not just like cultured.
But like
in a hole or something.
yeah, not bacteria growing. But sorry. Yeah, I've just been able to see a more creative side of myself and
100%.
brought that out into the real world, because now one of my favorite things is musicals, you know?
Oh yes,
Like
but
whether it's storytelling or art or just creativity in general, it's brought that out in me, which I never thought I had. But once you try to cultivate it and build it, everybody has it.
I affirm all those things to you, and I also loved the aspects of you within your creativity that nobody else has leans into, and especially in D&D, which is why I think about campaign 2 with Nyx or Rod. And when we connected it a little bit to the Curse of Strahd stuff, I think your creativity plus your roles, obviously, that were crazy, natural 20s and etc. But I think your creativity and the routes that you take with your character, as much as they are at odds or a conflict with other people, I think they offer a huge opportunity for story, which actually provides a healthy and fun resolution overall. Like you said, it's part of the journey.
Yeah.
But I think so I want to affirm you in that and what I've seen in you as like a storyteller, and it's been fun for me to grow in and see and being part of the playiness. But it's only because you care.
Yeah.
Again, which why that matters. I wanted to kind of read a quote really quick though, as we connected back to the emotional parts, the connections, the parts of you when you were talking about that we find little pieces of ourselves in the characters we play, if we allow it. Because if I'm only gonna min-max a fighter just because we're gonna do like a 3-hour 4-hour one shot, I mean, I might not put as much emphasis on who I am into that. But if I've got a 50 plus campaign happening, a session campaign, and you're asking me for a backstory, 9 out of 10 I'm gonna put pieces of who I am, because it's just that's how it is.
Yeah.
But I want to read this quote. It's from the Empathy Museums. Claire Patty, who also is a part of that, and the Empathy Museum is really interesting. They help people to understand different stories and how that can impact your daily life, which is really fun. But this is what it says. Stories have a transformative power to allow us to see the world in a different way than we do if we just encounter it in our own. Stories are an entry point to understanding a different experience of the world. What's the first thoughts that come to mind as in reading that or hearing that?
So when I think about that, I think of the story that other people are trying to tell me through their characters in D&D.
Yep.
Or even if it's completely outside of D&D, just stories in general. Like, if my sister's telling me a story through her point of view, it's just like, how would I react if I were in that same situation. Like, would I have been able to handle it that well? Would I have handled it a different way that
Right.
may have made the ending turn out better, or just experiencing something with them? Like, something I love to do is experience food together with people. It's hard to tell a story about eating food. Like, it's hard to describe
I
it.
hear what you're saying. Yeah.
But if you're like experiencing like Disney World together or not together, you can describe your senses. And being a good storyteller is setting the atmosphere and setting
Yep.
the aromas and all that stuff, which you do a really good part as GM. You really help us visualize it. But it's stories are a way of experiencing things that you couldn't do together.
If you weren't, yeah, because you weren't there.
Because you weren't there, but you can still describe the experience and in
Yes.
a way have that experience together.
Love that. And even though we
Sorry, that wasn't very articulate.
No, that was great.
But
you hit on.
I think you get what I'm saying.
No, I totally get what you're saying. Well, even what you said though about food, you go to those places and eat those meals that are in different courses or whatever, and there's a story that's being told to you, and you're experiencing.
It's a different type of art, yeah.
Yeah, totally different type. But I'm just saying, like, you're in. And again, the word that jumps out to me is, or the two words, transformative power, because when you actually allow yourself to step into a story or let a story be experienced, there's a part of you that does need to change, because when it comes to stories there is change. If story doesn't have change or allow from a point A to point B and there isn't a change, that's not really a story. Like, that's why when you watch Marvel movies, you go from point A, they're just I don't know, it's just one person and they're whatever to the very end, and there is a massive world changing event. Like, from that point to there, like, you experience all these different changes and it feels so real, even though that's not real. It feels real though. And so that's where we get that word, like, to encounter.
Yeah.
And better to understand that. And so again, I think it's super important for us to allow a story to be experienced if you are looking to finally get immersed into your story. And that emotional piece that you're touching on, I think only happens when you actually care for a story. I mean, that's very black and white what I'm saying though. So what do you think on that? Do you feel that it's a little bit black and white? Like, when it comes to caring about a story and like really experiencing it, does it need to be experienced emotionally for you to experience it?
Fully, yes.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
In order to experience it fully, you need to have emotions. You need to have joy. You need to have sadness. You need to have anger. You need to have loss, pain. I feel like that's all part of everybody's day in and day out life. So maybe in order to escape that, you go into D&D and you have a silly session that night.
Yeah.
In order to kind of forget about any sadness you have in your life. But in order for that whole entire campaign, it should reflect life in some way. So there needs to be that sadness in the world as well. And maybe you're doing great outside and you kind of want that intimacy. And, some people say, oh, I just need a good cry. So they go into that world, and then you can have your cry in a safe space, because ultimately the table is a safe place with friends and family and people that you care about, where you can be yourself and be honest. And because sometimes, either if we're at work or something, we can't be honest and be true to who we are because you're in a professional environment.
And you're on, and you have to be focused on others, while this is more about, yes, being focused on others, but also being focused on yourself and experiencing something for yourself.
It's a type of therapy.
It is. And I even was thinking about that too, that, when people go through, again, I'll only speak for me. I don't want to speak for other people. Like, going through different harder or darker or rougher seasons in my life, I know that living inside of or I have an opportunity weekly to step inside of a different type of story is very healthy for my heart. It's very healthy for my mind. And I want to be careful to say only escape, because I think that there's different things out there and whatever, I won't go into it too much, but there's a healthy aspect of me to be like, you know what, I'm going to step into this. I'm going to laugh. I might cry. Or, you know what, I do need a good cry. Or I do need a good chuckle.
Yeah.
I do need a good, you know, but it really comes down to, I just need to play with my friends.
Yeah. Even like whether I'm playing poker with my cousins, playing D&D with my wife and my friends, or playing spike ball with you and my brothers. It's not about what we're doing. It's about being together. Obviously, the sports and the poker and the D&D are a conduit. So you're focused on something and experiencing something together, but it's really about the community with those people that you care about and love that I really try to focus on. Like, I'm not playing poker to try to win money. I'm playing poker to spend time with my cousins who I might not be able to see as much outside of that.
I love that. And so for those of you that are listening and really, you know, your stories they're fun, but there might be some opportunity for you that really, Trevor and I'll just say it this way. I think we're just trying to invite you into exploring that there might be some more experience. There might be some more fun. There might be some more opportunity to enjoy your story just a little bit more, especially with the safety and security of the people that are around you, because they love you.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is dive into the nitty-gritty of the story overall rather than the big climax, because the climax and the resolution feel more satisfying when you have an emotional, or your character has an emotional connection to the other characters, and then that translates to real life. You yourself having a more emotional connection with the people who are playing the characters.
That is perfect. That's a perfect way to articulate it. And I need to process that a little bit more. It's like when people, you know, they love the BBEG battle in the end. Bow, dun dun. And then maybe you win, or maybe someone dies, but you don't. It's like, okay, I'll just create another character. No.
Mourn that character. Yeah.
Feel it. So, Trevor, that is truly, like, I love that. And I think that was very clear to understand. And I hope, you know, this week, you know, for you and your games, you can start to enhance them and come to the table with more care for your story within itself. So if you're having trouble on this, or like you want to talk about it a little bit more, you hit me up on Instagram or TikTok at GMSmudge, all one word. Make sure to like, subscribe, hit the bell, follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, so that you can get notified each week when an episode drops. Please share this with your party. Maybe this would be a really great podcast to send to your party and have a conversation around next time you gather, just to see if, you know, where everyone stands on how well or where they want to see the story grow or develop over time. And comment below, what parts in your story do you feel like are missing? Do you feel like you're a player or a GM that's really wanting to push it more, or do you disagree with Trevor and I and kind of like love to hear about what thoughts you have there? But then lastly, make sure to add value to your game so that your game becomes more memorable. See you later.